So it's actually my pleasure to introduce the next panelist and moderator, Zoe Middleton. Hey, how are you?
Good to see everybody.
I just need to say, Zoe, you have my, like, throughout this entire thing, I'm just like, Zoe has the best energy. And like, anytime we would jump on a Zoom call, or like, I would even just be listening in, I'm like instantly energized. It's like instantly the caffeine shot I needed. So I just, yeah, exactly. You throw the punches. I love it. So I'm very excited about this panel that you are going to be moderating today, being Black in the world of design. But first, I would love to introduce you just as an individual. You are currently a director of design and product development at Arista, right? Arista?
Actually, it's I'm director of product design in marketing for Fabric.
Fabric. Okay. Oh man. Okay. All right. Awesome. So Fabric, and then you were also a senior product manager at Agbara Life. So you have a pretty extensive background in design, management, product development. So having you on this panel and having you as a moderator today is incredibly exciting. So just to go into some of the panelists that we're going to have today, you're going to be speaking with Oscar Harris, Mark Smith, Kevin Bethune. I may be mispronouncing that, but I want to make sure. Robin Reid. So excited for today's panel, and yeah, just wanted to give you the intro, and floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. And again, welcome everybody, and thank you again for joining in. I am really excited about this particular panel because it does mean so much to me personally, being a designer and of course a Black woman in the design field. So thank you. Amaroy introduced some of my panelists: Kevin Bethune, Robin Reid, Oscar Harris Jr., and Mark Smith. So everybody please join in, say hello. I should state that Mark is coming from us live from Copenhagen, Denmark. Kevin is coming all the way live from California. I'm here in Connecticut, and Robin is in New York, and Mr. Harris is from Atlanta. So if you could each kind of...
Where's my cool background? I feel left out.
But if everybody could just give a quick introduction of who you are, and a little bit about your background, how did you learn about your career, and then we'll just kind of kickstart it from there.
I'll start. Hi all, my name is Robin Reid. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I am currently a senior producer at Gallagher and Associates. We are an experienced design firm. We focus primarily on museums and institutional and cultural work. I think I learned about I know I learned about my career. It wasn't until I was into another career, which was being an executive producer in television and film, which I had done for many years. And then I got to a point where I wanted to try other things. I wanted to do things that were more spatial, that were more just testing technology and experience differently. And that's when I found out about being an experienced designer. I've always been a manager of creative process. I love driving creative teams. I love cultivating that energy and pushing it forward. I did that a lot in film, and I get really quite high from that. So I left a fairly great career, was at MTV at the time, and went back to school to NYU, to their interactive technology program, to get my master's so that I could learn more about technology and software development and hardware and technology. So yeah, that's how I got to where I am.
Wonderful, thank you. Mark?
I first learned about industrial design from my first roommate at Pratt Institute, where I was studying fine art. Zoe Pratt. So for my first roommate was a Greek guy, Dimitri Protosaltis, and he was like, when I was doing my 3D projects, he was like, come with me, to the real studio and the real lab, and we're going to do real work. And it was fantastic. And at that time, it was a big jump for me. I'm originally from the South, so early childhood Atlanta, and then we moved to Alabama. So it's already sort of this mass. I never went to New York until I went to art school to go to New York. So it was already a massive sort of thing to get to New York. So anyway, long story short, at that time, to me, becoming an industrial designer was far like being an astronaut. So I finished in fine art and painting, and then wind up later deciding, no, this is really what I'm meant to do, and had come back home down south and went to school at Auburn University and I got a second bachelor's in environmental design and a master's in industrial design.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's how I got started.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, yes, my name is Oscar Harris, and I'm an architect and artist, and I began my interest in creativity, I guess, at 5 years old. I told my parents I wanted to be a painter, and they said to me, if you're a painter, you're going to be poor. So maybe you need to look at something else. So I decided to be an architect in college and applied for that and did very well. Went to Howard University, went to Carnegie Mellon. I received a master's degree. I was the first African-American, by the way, to receive a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon University. Then my thesis was published in transportation, went to Atlanta, worked for a big company in transportation, laying out the MARTA system here in Atlanta, Georgia, and did all the management design with big projects. And then I started my own firm, Turner Associates. And for 30 years, I practiced design of major projects, airports, major office buildings, administration centers, housing, and have done about $4.4 billion of design constructed in the ground. So that's about it.
Fabulous. I love your shirt, by the way. Okay, love it.
It's my son's shirt. He owns a design company. His own design fashion company.
Would you prefer for me to call you Mr. Harris or Oscar?
You can call me Oscar. That'd be great.
Okay, perfect. And Kevin Bethune, would you mind giving a little bit of background for us, please?
You got it. You got it. So again, my name is Kevin Bethune. I'm the founder of Dreams Design in Life. I'm also the board chair for the Design Management Institute. If you go to dmi.org, you can find out more about that. And then I'm also writing a book for the MIT Press as a first-time author around the notion of strategic innovation through design. In terms of background, I was a creatively curious person when I was young, but I didn't know about design. Design, to Mark's point, felt like 1,000 miles away. So I started my career in mechanical engineering and worked in the nuclear profession, nuclear power generation, for a number of years. Business curiosity arose. That took me to business school. But that creative itch allowed it to inform the type of company I'd go for upon graduation. And Nike was at the top of the list, so I entered Nike in a business capacity. But being a product person at heart, I quickly migrated over to the product side of the business and met some newfound creative friends, real professional designers for the first time. And some of those designers gave me actually runway to actually cut my teeth on actual product under their mentorship. Ended up deciding to go back for a second master's degree in industrial design. So I went to Art Center and then got involved with a lot of incubator work in Los Angeles and was able to help scale a platform that BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, ultimately acquired. And it was in that role leading design for that platform until 2 years ago where I decided to start my own practice.
Fabulous. Thank you. Well, thank you again for giving your time today. And I would just like to honestly jump right into this conversation and not hold any baby punches. Let's go straight in for it, okay? So let's talk about diversity in the design field. I mean, I think we can all be honest and say that it is lacking, and with everything that's happening in today's world and culture, you know, we can definitely see these disparities. How have you seen diversity, racism, segregation, or inclusion in your career since you started? And then I'll let you each answer that question, and then I'll go on to another question. So, Kevin, since you're up, would you like to go ahead and start?
Sure. I'll be honest. As I was discovering design, right, and I was, appointed by peers to notable luminaries and even the design pioneers of the past, and I just didn't see any of me, right? And that was a notion. Now, having gone through engineering, I was used to that in some ways. So I think when I think about the design industry, and especially as of late with the jarring tragedies that have rocked the world.
Yep.
I also think about, like, where do we spend a lot of our time as designers, and however long we've been in the field. I think about a lot of the covert stuff, the subtle stuff that happens that breathes into notions of white supremacy and holds people back. And we talk a lot about microaggressions and things. So I try to help my clients as well as people in my networks understand, like, there are ways to mitigate and actually hopefully eradicate some of those subversive behaviors by just being very clear in your servant leadership approach. And creating environments for teams to be successful and calling out those behaviors that are so problematic.
Sure. Thank you. Ms. Oscar, would you like to go in?
Oh, boy. What can I say? It is systemic racism in the professions. In my profession, I'm in the world of the built environment, the constructed environment. So when you talk about the design of a building or planning or designing symbols of civilization, because buildings are going to be around a long time. And my track, when I look at it, I think only 0.01% of professional architects have reached the point that I have. That's a sad commentary. When I have to apply for a project, they always put you in a category called minority, which I did not want to be put in. And so, and the system puts you in there and looks at you like that. Now, there's two areas in which you participate. You participate in this design world as an employee, or you participate as an owner. An employee world is one world, and an ownership world is a totally different world. In both of those worlds, racism and basically exist. In the employee world, it's going to be what they do is to pretty much hire you to participate and use your talents and put you in the place that you fit in the best for the economic growth of that particular company. And that's fine. And you can work there, but you're not really, I don't think, fulfilling your own self sometimes. You're working for somebody else and they're telling you what to do. Pretty much work on this, or here's a project. Oh, I'm so happy about that. And here's some money. If you can make some money for the folks, that's a good thing. They will keep you aboard and keep raising your salary. And that's wonderful. I myself, I didn't want to do that at a certain point in 72, I think it was. I decided after making a lot of money that I want to be in it for myself. So I started out and when you start as an owner, everything changes because now you're going to be in a competitive role against the majority firm. And they treat you totally different, and because you're competing for the same piece of the pie.
Can you touch on some of those differences?
Different, when you say differences?
You were saying that when you were as an owner, now being a black man as an owner, competing against some of the other architects.
I can be I work for Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a big engineering company worldwide. and great people, you know, great folks and everything. And my salary was just going up exponentially and working on this. And I had a lot of, I had a gentleman that put me in charge of things. So I mean, and then he backed me up. So I was pretty powerful there. But when I left there and started my own company, then, wait a minute now, what are you going to do now? You know, I mean, you're going after this similar project. So then I had to come back. Mm-hmm. When you come back, you're competing against Parsons Brinker Hall. So they're going to go get whoever they're going to go get, and you got to go get whoever you're going to get to compete. Yeah. And you have to submit in for this sort of work. And the first thing that comes on to you is experience. When you get into, and you're out there by yourself, against the world, hey, how much experience do you have? Have you done this project before? Have you signed on the dotted line for this particular project before? What's your experience? Show me your financials, lifting up your skirt. All this type of thing happens. And you start writing, instead of on the back side of checks, you start writing on the front side of checks, everything changes. Yeah. And it's a totally different world out there, you know? And bottom line is they don't, in general, I'm making some generalizations here, of course, but they don't want you to be in that control position when you're out there by yourself. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to be as good as they are. And they're gonna, and it's just the way it is, you know? And so I always had to compete. For every project I went under, I had to pay out like $20,000, $30,000 to go after that project. I had to present for the project. I had to present a whole team. I had to beat out the other competition in order to get the project. And that's where the stress begins. Because you're putting out a lot of money knowing full well that there is a lot of bias out there. Why are you throwing out all this money?
Right. Well, thank you for that. What about yourself, Robin?
So I have a couple of, I'm in a couple of different categories here to touch on. I'm very sorry about that. I didn't lock my door. But my lunch was just delivered to me, if you don't feel jealous at all. So, you know, a couple of areas. So as a manager, you know, in this world, I mean, I'm dealing with architects, I'm dealing with technology people, I'm dealing with software developers, I'm dealing with graphic designers. All of these are very, first of all, white dominated fields, but they're also very male dominated fields. Mm-hmm. So when you come in the room, and it's a lot to manage, sorry gentlemen, to manage a lot of men who have worked very hard to become the experts at their craft, to step in a room and get them to pay attention to you. And as a Black woman, you know, you just add an added element to that, you know. So you do, you know, I think what I find for myself is it's a lot of times to just get people to acknowledge that what's coming out of your mouth has value. Yep. Acknowledge that you can lead. So I would say, you know, in that regard, I think for a lot of white designers and a lot of white professionals, it's usually a shock. Like I'll walk into, like in New York in particular, like, so, you know, I'll walk into, and we're talking old school architects, like, you know, the old, not to be specific on the ethnicities, but it's very Irish, very Italian. You know, you walk into the room and sometimes they want to know if you're the one taking notes. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm actually the lead project manager on this thing. You know, I did a project down in Alabama where I had to lead a bunch of hardware and AV installers and try to get them to do things in my schedule. I mean, there were moments where they just literally returned their backs to me because they thought, you know, so those kinds of things, and they do hit you, you know, but I think internally what I have to do is what I have been doing is I say, well, they just don't know me. Like, they don't know how much they're going to benefit from following me. Like, I'm bringing something very different to the table. Right. So that is something that's very real. Sort of just, you know, as a manager, like I said, just going into a room and having people, a lot of people walk in the room and they may not know anything, but they turn their heads to that person. And it might be the guy that's working for me. It might be the junior designer that's working for me. They'll assume he's the one. Then I would say, like, from an idea of just pushing designers forward, you know, I hear a lot of, when I have had opportunities to have mixed teams, or when I've brought in young designers and interns, you know, there's this idea that there's this aesthetic, you know, that doesn't fit within the canon. So there's a very, like, sort of the linear, the lines, the cleanness, the, you know, there's a feeling about when Black designers bring something to the table that somehow it feels unpolished, right? And for me, I always find that interesting, because this is an industry that I'm in that prides itself on disruption, on innovation, to think differently. But the second you have a different idea that doesn't really fit within their very comfortable canon, and there are certain, I would say, ethnic viewpoints that they can get with, because they're very precise and they're very mechanical. So to me, I always find that very interesting, that they often have difficulty giving room to voices because they have this aesthetic that they've established as a canon, and they like to write about being disruptors and innovators, but things very much follow a similar pattern to other things. Then you'll see very big firms, you know, copying urban graffiti, selling that. And it's like, okay, well, I guess you found a way to adopt that to fit your, took you some time, but you found a way to adopt that to fit your needs, and so now it's cool. So now you'll go out and you'll hire one or two artists. And so, listen, I'm always happy when those things happen, but it is frustrating for me to see that some of those alternative voices often have a hard time coming to the table. So as a manager, and part of the reason why sometimes I ruffle feathers is I make space for those voices. Like, I will deliberately stop a meeting and make space for somebody who has something different to say. Sometimes it's a Black person, sometimes it's a very quiet person. You know, and I just give them that moment, because you should be able to hear something different for a few minutes if we're in the brainstorming session or design workshop. Like, every idea, they say that a lot, every idea counts, but often it's the loudest voice.
So true.
So yeah, those are some, there are many things, but I think those are some of the things that jump out for me right away.
Thank you so much. Mark, I would love, we touched a little bit about this when we were talking, and I would love for you to kind of just talk about that and share our conversation and other experiences that you had with the team, because I think that you had some very good insight.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, it's tough. It's interesting to me because when Zoe first approached me about this panel, at first I was sort of like, well, what am I going to kind of talk about? And it was amazing that the more I'm sort of like, you know, writing a little notes and everything, there's so many things that I kind of just forgot about. And I think this is very much the nature, because in order for us to succeed, we have to have a bit of the blinders on. You know, we have to have a little bit of the sort of just the water, you know, it's like you're hitting the bias and the inequality and the racist things and all of this sort of stuff. And you just keep going. You focus on the work, you focus on how you can succeed. And you don't dwell, you know, you don't sort of have time to sort of stop and smell the oppression roses, you know, just like, oh yeah, it really stinks. No, you don't have the time for that. You know, you got to keep going. I mean, I think to Oscar's point, it is absolutely systemic. And I think that is critical to put in the front, is that it's systemic and the roots are so deep. In regards to bias, I was thinking about the whole thing about, we talked about the fact I'm in Europe, I'm in Copenhagen, and I've been living in Europe now for about 7 years. I started in Austria and now in Copenhagen, Denmark. And one of the interesting things that happened is the bias changed. So in the US, the bias is that I was a Black designer. Right? And so I had, there was a senior VP, I'd gotten hired. He wasn't part of the hiring process. I get hired, I start, he calls me in the office. He says, I just like to meet all of the new, senior people. And I was traveling, didn't get a chance to. And so I just wanted to talk with you. And I'm like, okay, sure, we talked. And he's like, you speak so well. Why is that? And so I told him, well, I watched a lot of public television, a lot of BBC growing up, and it wasn't a joke for him. It was like, he took that as like, oh, it's really a lot of sense. And so, so I had a lot of sort of experience there. I was the only, in a factory, it was like the offices were on the second floor and the factory was underneath. And in the entire building of some 400 and so people, I think there was one black guy who worked in the factory. Took a few months for me to actually see him. And there was zero upstairs. And I think from the inception of the company, which is like 1800s, I was the first. And there was, I remember someone brushing up against me downstairs in the factory, and I said, hey, sorry. And they're like, did you go to school for what you do or something? And I'm like, yes, actually, a lot of school. So that was my experience here. And then I get to Europe, and the concern was that I was an American designer. Mm-hmm. So the boss of the boss who hired me, he came to me, again, it was that first day, and he said, I hear this is the first time that you are in Europe, but this cannot be the case. This is not possible. And I said, yes, it actually is the first time I'm in Europe. He goes, this is a problem. And I'm like, okay, well, what kind of problem? I mean, I've already been hired. I'm here. And he was like, what we are going to do is, it's very important that you can design at a European level. And you're an American. No insult, but you are known for mass products, right? It's not very refined design. So what we're going to do is every weekend, you're going to tell the assistant, and you can fly anywhere in Europe where you can leave at 12 o'clock on Friday and come back on Monday morning so that you can explore Europe while you're here.
That's fabulous.
So it was actually fabulous.
Yeah.
But my point is that I think design is a very cultural thing, and it's there's Scandinavian design and French design and German and Japanese and all of an American design canons and design. And when you go through school, just like the history, American history, you don't really see us really reflected there. And it's no different. It was no different when I went through fine arts at Pratt, and no different when I went for industrial design. And so when you have this really deep systemic issue and systemic bias, it's very, very difficult because, again, to Oscar's point, it's about money. I mean, at the end of the day, you're hired to make money. Or if you're in a business for yourself, you're there to make money. And if there's risk, which is to say, we can hire someone who's like us and whatever, and it's easier, or there's some risk in this person who is different, then oftentimes it's harder to get work or to get a client.
You Mark, you mentioned something that was very interesting, and I've heard this from so many people, and it's, well, you speak so well, or I've heard, you're so articulate. And I'm thinking to myself, well, do you say that to a white person? Like, why do I have to speak well because I'm Black? Or you put me in the articulate category because of the way that I'm talking. But do you say these same things to a white person who's applying for this job or is your fellow coworker? So that's very interesting. So thank you.
Well, it's what they know. It's or what they're familiar with, I should say, not what they know, but what they're familiar with. I mean, I think it's interesting that they often take the way I speak as a reflection of themselves. Like your parents must have been thinking how you can speak well in a more white way, which I never really saw the connection there. My parents were civil rights activists. My mom went to Tuskegee University. It was all about talk like Martin Luther King, talk like Malcolm X, speak well. It was a requisite growing up. So the other factor in regards to, I think if you speak well, whereas, you have like G.W. Bush, he didn't speak well and he was the president.
Right. Our current president doesn't speak well. What are we talking about?
President.
But yeah, true.
Exactly.
Robin, I just want to hit on one thing that you mentioned, and I'm going to ask another question. You're absolutely right about being a woman of color in positions of power. You do have to fight for, unfortunately, for people to listen and say, look, you have to listen to me. I know I'm not that white guy, but I'm the one in charge. This is the project. And yes, we're here to get things done, but I have a deadline and I need you to do your job. And for some reason, there's this like tug of war that they don't have with their other fellow colleagues, but I know for me, from my own experience, I have experienced that. And it's just like, oh, you're the director? Yes, I am. Let's get to work. Like, you shouldn't be questioning me. My business card says director. Let's go.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much for that. How have you overcome stereotypes in the design work, in the overall workplace that you might have experienced? And I open this up for everybody. So whoever would like to go first, please step in.
I'll just say that for the factory job I was telling you about, where I was designing at the factory, it was upstate New York. It was like an hour south of the Canadian border, out south of Montreal. So it wasn't like there was many African Americans in the community. I was there for 3.5 years, and when I left, I remember a colleague came up to me, and a white colleague, and he said, Mark, I never wanted to say this to you while you were here. I just sort of never knew how to say it to you, but you're the first Black person that I've ever worked alongside. Mm. And I just want to thank you, because just working with you and being your friend, I realized how wrong my perception of Black people was, and I never knew it, and I never knew that, and I really appreciate that. So I think you just do what you do. I mean, you just I think the challenge is, again, the systemic, where if there's one of you among hundreds, I mean, there's only so much impact.
Sure. Kevin, would you like to add to that point?
Yeah, I think these are excellent points, Mark. I think we have to navigate environments where we're dealing with majorities that have, unfortunately, a limited worldview for understanding and embracing different voices. And from our lived experiences, we bring, I think, uniquenesses, right? We're all individuals, right? But we do have some common chords of lived experiences where I think, like, I've had to figure out creative ways to garner trust for people that saw me and immediately saw a stereotype, and they would even like let the Freudian slip of what they really thought of Black people, right? But I think through establishing ways that I could demonstrate what's in it for them, each of my team members are on the table, like how can I think maybe 5 steps ahead of like what are the convictions that are going to move the needle and make the business achieve impact.
Mm-hmm.
And let's speak to those convictions. Let's frame our work in those ways, and being very courageous to speak up on those convictions when it mattered.
Right.
I think that those were the difference-making moments that helped get over that barrier, right? And then have people more comfortable with the idea of me leading them through a creative exercise.
Oscar?
Well, for me, and this is just me, when I was working for the big firm and everything, every day I had to go in there, and I was always conscious of subliminally, I knew something was going to come at me in a strange way. Someone's going to say something strange or something. So I have to come with a protective sort of a veil. And that puts anxiety in me, and the anxiety filled my spirit, you know? And that's the reason why I decided, oh, to hell with this, you know? I have my own firm.
Right.
I'm the one writing the checks. All of a sudden, all that anxiety went away dealing with folks. Because I'm the one telling people what to do and how to do it. And I think you have to own what you do. I mean, I've come down to that thing. You got to own what you do. As long as you're owning what you do, that's the only pathway that I see. The only pathway. And I think when you own what you do, you're going to see in your mind, everything will begin to change.
I love it.
And now I've had the virus thing to keep myself at home, and I've been reading a lot. I don't read a whole lot of stuff, but I've gotten very sort of spiritual and about my soul and all this type of stuff, but I learn a lot. One is if you have a special vibration, everybody in here has a special vibration, and God gave you that vibe. You came with the vibe, and you have to reinforce that vibe. And what happens when you're not doing your own thing and you're not really in focus with that, it causes you a lot of problems. And so the main thing is getting your own vibe, own your vibe, and be happy, even when things are bad, like all this stuff going on today, you know. You have to come with a great spirit, you know. And all these stereotypes, you know, you just have to get above. Just don't think about it. Just go on about your business and do the best you can at what God has given you. That's all I can think about.
That's fabulous. Own what you do, I think, is absolutely so true. So true. Robin, would you like to add to anything?
Yeah, I was thinking, as Oscar was talking, you know, I grew up, my father was, you know, he was a carpenter. He had a construction business. And I grew up in a very, very secure home. Like my family imbued, we were 6 kids, and sometimes our family ballooned out 12 kids because people were getting kicked out of houses and moving in. And my family never said no, honestly, such to the chagrin of their own children sometimes. But we always had a lot of, and like just a lot of confidence about who I was as a person, about our history, you know, about the challenges and struggles. So I always, for me, it's always interesting sometimes when I go into these settings, like, obviously I know I'm a Black woman, and that becomes apparent to me when other people tell me that, or they do things and they remind me that I'm different than them, right? And I think I read this quote once that I really loved. It was like, don't let other people define who you only are. That definition if you accept that yourself. Right. And it doesn't mean that the challenges are not going to be there, but every encounter I have, yes, sometimes I do get knocked really down. My confidence goes super low, but then I remind myself, you know what? Nobody's perfect. That's not who I am. That's not who I am. And I do reach out to my network. I keep my network tight. I will call my friends. I will call my parents. I mean, I live on a block in Brooklyn that's like people who are all work for the MTA and LIR, and they immigrated from all over the Caribbean and Africa. And these guys are the happiest guys. You know, I'll come home from work just grumpy, and they're just sitting there smiling. And I know they went through some stuff. Like they've been in New York for like 50 years, you know, and never cracking a bad, you know, always helpful. So one, I would say, I don't walk around with that defensiveness. So sometimes it's put upon me. But I always try to go back to my network and to my people and to my memory of who I am to help me go forward. I mean, the stereotypes are so many. Like, I wouldn't even be able to think about all of them and come up with a strategy for all of them. I think also close to what Kevin said is like, I bring something very unique to this process. I bring something that you are not going to get from anyone else. I'm not saying I'm better, but I have a very unique perspective. I've gone through my own challenges. I made a huge shift in my career. So all of those things, you want to be innovative, you want to disrupt. I've lived some of that disruption. I'm a Black person in America. We're always disrupting, we're always going around. So I'm the embodiment of that. So I try to like start to weave that into who I am. And oftentimes, you know, when you get a sympathetic ear, or I should say sympathetic, and open-minded ears and eyes, it can be a really beautiful thing. Like, I've gone through really difficult projects and teams have bonded, and I've learned from me and they've learned, you know, I've learned from them and they've learned from me. But, you know, I also have to be careful. Because if I do get sleepy about it sometimes, you know, sometimes, as you were saying, Zoe, you go in the room and you say, yes, I am the director. This is who I am. And you know what? How that's seen from us is you're pushing.
Yeah.
That's not really accepted.
Exactly.
It's not, you can't really be your authentic self. You can't really. So, you know, it's challenging, but I just love what I do. I love the creative process. I love being around all. And now I'm in New York, so I have like teams from all over the world, people from Asia and India and Germany and France, and everybody's bringing all their different ideas. So some of those people come to the table, they don't have the same stereotypes, you know, stereotypical images. And that's good. And in some ways, maybe not so great, little idolization, you know, like, oh, you know, I went to.
I've experienced that.
You know, but there's something kind of beautiful about that too. We just take it where we can get it, you know. So
I've experienced that.
I think it's gonna happen, but you just have to. I think of the speech earlier, Angela was talking about, you know, really like finding what you do and are you growing, and so that's what I love. I'm like, I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm learning. This is the skin that I'm in. I can't do that. Yeah. I'm going to do my best, and whenever I get a chance, I crack open the door, an internship, snatch you this person from over here. You're going to come. You're going to sit in the meeting with the CEO with me. And he's not going to say anything because he's really not, he's a liberal. So he's not going to look at me and be like, why is this young Black man here? Because it's really good for you. You know, so.
Well, I can't believe it, but we have 10 minutes left, and I feel like we just scratched the surface of conversation. So I do have a question from Stephanie. So bear with me as I go through her question. Through your roles of leadership, via your professional excellence, when you are the one of many, how can we open opportunities to support our clients or companies to respond with design with impact rather than corporate platitudes or symbolic gestures around diversity? How to move towards understanding anti-racism and creating systems that support this rather than the checkbox of diversity training in departments that use the same etiquette but not. Excellent question.
Yeah. Can I jump in really quick? So
yes,
this is on everybody's mind right now because we've all gone, I don't know, if you work at a company right now, you're in the midst of anti-racial messaging. And quite honestly, my response at this point has been, this is not my problem, this is your problem. So I'm going to start with you. You know, you can put on your seatbelt because you want to know about anti-racism. Let's sit down and talk about when I'm in my review with you and you use this kind of language with me, let me let you know how that makes me feel. You have to understand the context and the viewpoint that you're coming from. So right now, it's hard for me to think really big, come up with organizational plans, because what I'm finding right now is I'm needing to tell people, just go home and look at the mirror. Think about how you want to be treated. How are you treating other people? Think about how your children are treated. How would you want, you know, is that how do you treat other people's children that way? You got to start there. You got to change yourself.
Yeah, I think a big, in terms of like moving forward, I think so many of the sort of platforms are already there, but where there's a lack of kind of walking the walk, you know what I mean? You know, talking the talk. Like for instance, human-centered design. Is it really? Is human-centered design, exactly. Is it really human-centered? I mean, human-centered design becomes like one of those topics like we're colored. Well, you're only colored if you're other, because that means that the whites then are not colored. But of course, they are colored. We all have color, right? You know, we all are of all sorts of different shades of everything. So does human then sort of be human-centered design become like, okay, this is human and then other? I mean, how much diversity is taught in human-centered design? How much diversity is brought into understanding cultural differences, understanding all of these different sort of perspectives? The platforms are there, but they're very, very, to me, underutilized. Yeah, Kevin.
One thing I'd like to say in regards to what Robin was talking about, that basically it's up to the power structure to make the change. We are not we don't have a lot of power. The power is somewhere else. So the power has to come forth, and it not come forth with platitudes. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of platitudes, and then they're going to start a diversity group and all this other stuff, and they're going to have little groups, and they're going to send you to chicken dinners and all sorts of stuff like that, and give you some money and all that. Exactly. Everything is happy, you know? Exactly. No, you can't do that. Right. That's over with. You know, Black Lives Matter is over with, you man. So they have to come forward with something dramatic, worldwide, big.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
so true.
Amen.
Kevin, did you want to say something?
Yes. For me, this is a critical business issue. I think for me, it comes down to relevance and future fitness. Now, granted, like the last few months, we've seen unprecedented change that would have normally taken years to achieve. We've seen that change happen in a matter of days, if not weeks. So if I'm a large enterprise, if I'm a large enterprise and my organization doesn't mirror the world, I have a mismatch. And my business can get caught off guard as value criteria shift. And right now, we're so connected. Like I can see into a company, a top performing brand, and understand what their employees are saying instantly about that brand and match that with the platitudes and see the mismatch. Mm-hmm. So if organizations are not making space, and to Mark's point around human-centered design, like that studio, that innovation studio better mirror the world and have representative voices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have a question from Ryan Harrison, and it's interesting because I was going to say something very similar to this, and his question is, how can I, as a white guy, clearly I'm not Ryan, help get more minorities and people of color into design? Because most professional teams I have joined have been almost 100% white dudes. Uh-oh, too many people came in with questions. Uh-oh. That one. I lost it. Sorry, Ryan, I lost the rest of your question. But no, he's absolutely right. Like I hear so many major corporations coming out now, right? Like, oh, we have to diversify our team and have people of color. And then it turns into, where are the black designers? And I'm like, right here, okay? I've been here the entire time. How come you haven't seen me? I've applied to jobs, okay? Have you searched for me or other people? So I hear you, but I don't hear you because I don't see you. So please, panel, talk about this. How can we really have these corporations from Fortune 500 to smaller corporations to mid-sized companies, and not just privately held companies, see us and be represented in the senior director level, in the executive vice president level, and even in the C-suite levels?
Well, I think it's two parts. Number one, they need to publicize and promote people like yourselves that are all around. They need to be put into professional publications. You guys need to be pumped up, in other words, shown. Mm-hmm. That's number one, and very, very important. We have not been celebrated. You're secondarily put away. Nobody even knows you even exist. That's number one. Number two is you have to reach back, and it's into the educational thing in the schools. Yes. You all of a sudden don't create somebody. You know, you don't create a designer. And in my case, you don't create an architect. Architect takes a long time to get to that point. So you got to go into public schools and get those young kids and start to get them excited about design and let them fall in love with design. And over the years, things will change. I have a program called the Atlanta Center for Creative Inquiry, which I've been doing for 15 years, but reaching high school and try to excite them about designing and creativity. And that's the only thing I know how to do.
Kevin, did you want to say something?
That's a great point.
Oh,
No, just real quick.
No. Yeah.
There's a myth that there's no pipeline. There is a pipeline. And organizations need to work hard to intersect people for where they are, right? It's like when I open up design lists and design magazines and award celebrations, it's always, I'm sorry to say, the same people. And I don't see many of us being celebrated to Oscar's point. So the pipeline's out there. It's like, are you willing to do the work to make your organization more relevant?
yeah.
Absolutely.
I would just say to Ryan, along lines, it's definitely, I would try to put myself in the midst as a volunteer with any organizations that are trying to pump up young people. Like I do a lot with Black Girls Code, and that group has really grown. And, you know, if you get a middle schooler excited, and they're not necessarily looking at you as a white guy, you're just getting them excited about their own knowledge, they're not that far off from becoming an entry-level person. You know, they'll have them make college decisions, and then they can help them get the internships. I mean, it is true. Like I do find it difficult. I mean, I went to ITP at NYU, and they actually have a very aggressive recruiting program. But look at the city colleges. I mean, there are people working in IT. If you're doing software, I mean, there are people doing IT. There are people doing general construction. Maybe go to non-traditional areas and encourage people to learn about what you're doing and about your industry.
I just want to say, we have an additional 5 minutes because our conversation is so good. So
Okay, cool. I just say this. I was contacted about 2 weeks ago by one of the professors at my old university, Auburn University. The industrial design program there is housed in the College of Architecture. So it's the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. And he reached out to me about this very, very topic. And he was like, hey, Mark, I would really appreciate if you could add your voice to this and help us to better understand. And I agree, like with what Robin said. It's like, that's and I told, it's you guys, like, seriously, like, you don't, I mean, I'm in Copenhagen, right? I graduated over a decade, I mean, like 15 years ago. I mean, in all of the CAD's College of Architecture, Design, and Construction, there was not one African-American, Black American professor in the entire college in all the different departments, in all the different schools, okay? It was that way when I was a student, and it's still that way right now.
yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it's again, it's a lot of platitudes, but at the end of the day, they have to really do something.
One thing I'd like to say, because it's just a little bit of time that I found, and I want to share, so I only have this one chance. I found that if you go to the garden by yourself, whatever garden you have, but it's outside, wherever it is, the garden, be out there by yourself. This includes white, black, yellow, green. All of us need to go to our gardens, spend time in the garden, and I think you'll find a lot of the solutions there.
Thank you, Oscar. I have a question from Mark, and a question from Mark, not you, Mark. Sorry, Smith. Is design reaching minority-dominated schools? I feel art and design is becoming an optional other elective. I mean, I remember when I attended Pratt, we did have people of color in the design field. I think where it begins to thin out is as we progress in our careers and after we graduate from art school and we say, okay, we're going to start our professional careers, that's when the thinness of Black people in design really comes very minuscule. throughout this entire process of getting to know various different Black designers, I was called a very, very rare unicorn, being a Black industrial designer with a director level. Like, how many other women are out here like this? And I'm striving to go further than where I am now, so that way other women of color or other Black men can see me in the consumer goods industry. She's inspirational. I want to follow her lead. And I think that because there's not enough of us out there right now, that's why we begin to slide down and we're not really represented in the industry.
I'm sorry, Zoe, can I just say one thing? So it's just, I've never met you before, right? I met you on LinkedIn. And the reason I met you on LinkedIn is you post some article. I was like, oh, interesting. I looked at her picture and I thought, oh, a Black product designer. I'm going to start following her. And I think all of us, you know, on this panel,
that's how Kevin and I met.
You know, and so we do have these opportunities to network more and to be connected and just spread the excitement that way, you know. And it's something that I often tell people. It's like, oh, I met this great woman on LinkedIn and I'm doing a panel tomorrow. So
I'll meet you in Brooklyn though, because I'm not too far.
Okay, yes.
I think we have like a minute left. Does anybody want to say anything before, with everything that's going on between Black Lives Matter, COVID? How do people stay positive and upbeat with all of this heavy stuff that's weighing on our shoulders today, and still yet be creative and influential in today's market? Okay, 30 seconds, go.
In time,
Go ahead, Kevin.
no, in times of uncertainty, these are when our creative faculties are, you know, at their best. So
Absolutely.
find the needs, follow your convictions, and put the energy in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And you know, for our parents and our parents' generation, fighting this fight as part of like every day, life didn't stop. You know, yeah. six kids, sometimes going into 12. I mean, it was never easy.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, you keep going.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mace. I would say, you know, like I just look around at the people around me and see at the enormous challenges people are overcoming and the kind of great sacrifice people are making. Like I have a lot of nurses in my particular part of Brooklyn, and, you know, I see them get up at 5 a.m. and they're going to work, and I'm like, the least I can do is be positive and try to think about the next level.
Exactly.
As Oscar says, own what you do.
Yeah.
And
speaking of Oscar, I want to jump on really fast. Oscar, tell us your son's fashion label so we can all get these cool shirts.
Oh, you like this shirt? It's called
tell us.
TLC International, the honorary citizen. The honorary
all right.
citizen.
We'll put it in the chat so everyone can get it. You look so cool.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. And
thank you,
all of your insights.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice meeting you all.
All right. Nice to meet you too. Good to see you, Kev.
You too.